Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Zimfer. I'm an assistant professor of practice at the School of Construction Management Technology, Purdue University, and I'm here with our BoilerBuilt construction channel. Joining me today is Craig Burgess, the State Building Commissioner at the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, and Chad Spitznagel, the Building Commissioner at the City of West Lafayette, Indiana. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and taking part in today's conversation.
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, we'll go ahead and get into some questions. And again, today's video is to let our students and those that would watch the video to know about all the different, I guess, occupations or players that are in the construction industry. And it's not just about what you see happen on the job site when you drive by or you visit a job site. There's a whole lot of other entities that are involved. And obviously your two offices play a big role in that. So, Craig, let's start with you. What role do you play kind of in the construction industry within the state of Indiana?
Okay. Well, first of all, as far as my individual position goes, I'm probably best described as the state's chief building code official. I oversee two groups in our agency, the folks in plan review who review construction plans for code compliance prior to construction, and code services, a group that answers general code questions for people and are also involved in providing support to the Fire Prevention and Building Safety Commission. We also hear variance requests in-house, and we can get into that later if we need to. My position used to oversee code enforcement at the state level, but several years ago, the agency had a little bit of reshuffling, and they took me out from under the state fire marshal and put me as a direct report to the executive director of the agency. And they left code enforcement under the fire marshal's purview. They actually found that the inspectors got a little bit warmer welcome in the field when they said they were from the fire marshal's office than when they said they were from Homeland Security. So, trying to keep things as practical as possible, they decided that was a smart move, and it's worked out well. So most of what I am involved with in construction is typically done before the first shovel breaks the earth. It's basically code issues, interpretations, as I said, plan review, all of the various regulatory things that take place on a project before the construction begins. That's probably the best way to kind of put it in a single bucket. And if we have an opportunity for questions on individual topics, I'll be happy to address them.
Okay, so all the kind of the pre-construction phase. And then also you mentioned variances, which again would hopefully be all pre-construction. So a quick question, Craig, before I move on to Chad. Who writes code in the state of Indiana, building code, that is?
If you mean that literally, it is probably most often the International Code Council through the publication of their model code documents. But the Fire Prevention and Building Safety Commission is the body in the state of Indiana that promulgates and adopts all of the construction rules and laws that we all have to comply with. That's an independent body separate from the agency. We just act in support of them. They're all appointed by the governor. I think they serve 3-year terms individually, but they don't all come up for renewal at the same time. So they do try to maintain some bit of institutional memory. But that's the body that is in charge of adopting all of the rules. So when we try to enforce the codes, it isn't the codes so much that we're enforcing as the rules of the commission, because as part of their adoption process, they frequently amend the model code documents too.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not Craig Burgess out there writing building code in the state of Indiana.
No, it's not me.
Yeah, understood. And Chad, how about your role as the building commissioner for the city of West Lafayette? What's your role in the construction industry?
So my direct role in the construction industry is obviously I oversee building commissioner role in West Lafayette, but I also am in charge of administrative officer duties, as well as the director of rental housing. So I kind of am fortunate in the fact that I get not a specific just role in permits and inspections. I also get to start a project from the very beginning and get to sit in negotiations through the Area Plan Commission with plan developments and such. I also get to have my hands in fence permits and signs and all the other little nuances in the zoning ordinance. So I think, a big thing is when you picture a building commissioner, because I've had two titles of building commissioner in two different municipalities, and the other municipality, I just got building permits. But so I think, when you look at the building commissioner role, it kind of varies by municipalities, and the fact that in West Lafayette, I get to touch planning and zoning, I get to touch inspections, permitting, and I also get to be a part of the rental housing program, which is only really one of very few that's allowed in the state of Indiana anymore. So we're fortunate, and obviously we have a college town, so plenty of rentals. I think we have well over 10,000 rentals in the city. So over a 2 and 4 year period, our team cycles through those. So while the building commissioner sounds like it should just be, similar to what Craig does with the state, and I get to touch a lot of class 1 structures like he does, but also have a pretty watered down role too, and get to touch a lot of different things. So.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, for people that are pursuing a career in construction, to really understand what your jurisdiction that you're working in, what the offices in that jurisdiction do, because it's not a one size fits all, right? This is where I always recommend that go in and meet your building commissioner, meet their office, meet the area plan people, if there's a city or a county surveyor, just really understand what those offices do, what the services they are, that they provide. It makes your life easier, but it also makes those various offices, makes their lives easier, because you're more well informed about, which services you need from which office. And I truly believe that, you guys do provide a service. I think some people look at, in code enforcement, inspections, building commissioners, as could be a controversial thing, but it's a partnership, right? We're all trying to build good structures, of course, here in the state of Indiana and other states. And it's a partnership to work towards that goal, regardless of what part of the industry we're coming from, the supplier side, the builder side, subcontractors, your offices, engineering offices, things like that. So it's important to note, I think.
Yeah, that is very important, because very often we are kind of seen as obstacles, when I don't really think that's justified. But there's no question that a good deal of what we do has a big impact on the economic development of the state. We really have to be seen as a partner in that process to keep things moving while still protecting the safety of the public.
Absolutely. So Craig, could you briefly describe, what's a typical work week look like for you? And I know it's probably been a little different the last couple of years, but what kind of operations do you go through, and where do you spend your time?
I spend most of my time at my desk here in the Indiana Government Center South. I do not get out in the field. There really isn't any need for that. And if people were to start requesting my presence at job sites to take a look at individual site conditions and job conditions, I would never get anything else done. So we have to leave all of that in the capable hands of all of the local officials. Things really haven't been that different in the last couple of years for us. The workload that we see come through the project flow through plan review slowed down just a little bit in 2019, but not much, and it picked back up again going into 2020. And this year we've had the best year in terms of number of projects and fees generated too, frankly. Since 2019, might even be rivaling the 2018 figures. And we had a period of about a year and a quarter where everybody worked remotely. I was at home working from an office in my basement, and the folks that I supervised did a fabulous job with that. There was no dip in productivity. Everything just worked out very smoothly. we've been back in the office now full time since July. So we're pretty much back to normal here. As far as what a typical week looks like for me, that's changed a bit over the last few years, primarily because of code interpretations. That's a service that my office provides. It's allowed for by statute. Any interested person that has a dispute over a building law with a local official, meaning someone at the municipal or county level, can ask for an interpretation of that law. And the first year I was building commissioner in 2017, I had 2 of those. And this year, I'm just looking at my whiteboard here off to the side, I'm just about to break 50.
Wow.
So we've had probably 130 to 140 requests over the last 4 years. And of those, I've issued just over 100. So a lot of my time is spent researching code interpretation requests, writing interpretations, revising them, running them past our agency counsel's office to make sure I haven't overstepped, and then issuing those. So that's a pretty healthy portion of my time. We also made a change a couple of years ago. I alluded to this earlier. Our code services group handles variance requests in-house now. Those used to be heard only by the commission once a month, but to try to provide a little more timely service to our customers, we got the approval to bring those applications in-house before they go to the commission. We make determinations on probably 80 to 90% of them within about 10 business days. It's the rare ones that get referred to the commission. So I think we're doing a good job with that. And we have a committee here in-house that meets on those once a week. So that takes up about a half day every week. The rest of it is kind of general administrative tasks that you'd have in any government agency this size. But there's a lot of support that I provide to the commission, to the code enforcement group, even though they don't report to me, they still have questions, obviously. And then the questions that just come in from the general public.
Great. Chad, how about you? A typical week, I'm sure some of it translates to what Craig just discussed, and some of it's going to be a little bit different.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you were going to do a percentage, I'd probably say I'm at my desk 75% of the time and out in the field or at different meetings, the other 25%. But a typical work week, I get to start out in the office. I have right now we have 3 inspectors between rental housing and building, and a couple administrative assistant staff members. So in the morning, it's easier to plan the rental housing because they're scheduling those weeks and months in advance. But obviously, if somebody's calling in today, we're doing building inspections on it tomorrow. So the building inspections, it's a day to day, to get those scheduled. So we'll get those going. If we have a high level of inspections that day, I'll be in the field doing some inspections to kind of supplement, the big commercial inspections, or I'll be in the office working on rental housing issues, plan development negotiations, code issues, building permit reviews, and the like. So it all depends. Each week's a little bit different for me, but I'm not stuck in the office 100% of the time, which is nice.
Sure. Chad, could you briefly describe the types of inspections that you and your fellow inspectors take part in?
Absolutely. So the building side, we would be doing class 1 and class 2 structures, both commercial and non-residential and residential, excuse me. We would do everything from footings, under slab inspections, that included pressure test, pre-slab pours, rough end framing, including mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, and then final inspections. We at the city of West Lafayette also include our fire department on a lot of commercial inspections. So we work pretty hand in hand with the fire inspector in West Lafayette as far as commercial rough ends and finals. So it's really good working relationship with them. So, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of our inspection program.
Great. So Chad, I'll stay with you for a moment. how did you get to the building commissioner of West Lafayette, Indiana? Can you give us a quick career path that you've taken?
I think if I were to explain my career path to building commissioner, it would be different than any other building commissioner's path, just because, I'm not a building construction management, graduate. My master's is in public administration. I had a director when I was in Westfield that said, "Hey, you have the attitude and the aptitude to lead a group. I can help teach you." That doesn't mean that I didn't have any background in construction. I grew up in some of it, but I wasn't swinging a hammer. I wasn't even a building inspector before I was a building commissioner, which is atypical. So I wouldn't describing my route to here is a lot different. Like I said, in my last role, I didn't have to do any planning and zoning, and really, while it would be nice to have an urban planning degree, there's a lot of codes that are already in place. So while I'll leave a lot of the code writing to Craig and interpret, those major interpretations to him, and like he said, the International Code Council, I get to basically just administer and enforce those. So it's changed a lot over the period.
I've worked in dozens and dozens of jurisdictions in, I think, 4 different states. And the path is always interesting to me because it never seems to be the same, whether you're in an urban jurisdiction or a very rural jurisdiction. The building commissioners all have, and their inspectors all have a different path on how they got to where they are today. So it's always just interesting to hear. Craig, can you share with us your path to your
Sure. And what you say is absolutely correct. For the last couple of years, I've addressed the professional practice class at Ball State's architecture school once a year. And we talk about a lot of things, but part of it is alternative career paths for people in architecture. I talk about building codes and things of that sort that they might want to keep in mind as alternatives, because it can be a really rewarding field, but it's not one that I expected to go into. I'm a registered architect licensed in Indiana and Illinois. I had about a 35-year-long career in architectural practice that basically stopped at the right on the cusp of the recession in 2008. I had been working for an engineering and architecture firm, large E, little a, and they decided right at that point that they were going to get out of the architecture business, and it was not a good time to be looking for work. So I ended up becoming a project manager for a small builder of custom homes, folks that built my own house. And I worked for them for almost 3 years and really didn't enjoy it much. They were not interested in having me on board as an architect. So I basically just did project management work, and it didn't suit me that well. And I had an opportunity in 2013 to come work at the state as a plan reviewer in obviously the plan review group. Dean Illingworth was the fellow that was in charge of the department at that time, or not the entire department, but in the division. And I reviewed plans for a couple of years, and then they put me in charge of that section, and I managed them for another couple of years. And at the changeover from the Pence to the Holcomb administration, the fire marshal came to me and asked if I'd be interested in putting my hat in the ring for the building commissioner position, because they knew they were going to be going with someone else, but they just hadn't decided who yet. And he and the gentleman that was then the director of the agency both recommended me to the governor, and I expressed my interest, and he appointed me. So sometimes I wonder how exactly all of that happened, but it's been good for me, and I like to think it's been good for the agency and the people that I work with and the people that we work for. The job suits me pretty well, which I didn't really expect that it would. I enjoy the amount of thinking that I have to do, and I've always enjoyed writing. And trying to tease the logic out of an arcane and complicated code requirement is a challenge, and I enjoy doing it.
I think that's what we're all looking for, right? I think people like to be challenged, right? You don't want to show up to work every day and just pass paper or be out on a job site and just oversee, right? Most people like to have a challenge put in front of them and like to problem solve. And it's great that you both found a spot that you can be successful in. Craig, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said with code in Indiana, I think you mentioned it twice, that it's law. And I don't know if everyone necessarily understands that. So that might lead into my next question. Are there misconceptions that the public have about what your two offices do?
There are some. The state arranged the building codes a little in an unusual way, I guess, for lack of a better term. As you might expect, they drew a line between what they call class 1 and class 2 structures. Class 2 is basically 1 and 2 family residential and their accessory structures. Townhouses, if they meet certain design requirements, fall into that category as well. And pretty much everything else is class 1, what we typically think of as commercial and large scale multifamily. And while the state adopts codes that affect all of those, we have a 2020 Indiana residential code that applies to class 2 structures throughout the state. The state has no enforcement authority over class 2 structures. That's all done at the local level. Our code enforcement staff here at the state cannot enforce the code in the areas where they would otherwise have jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction on class 1 structures in every location in the state that doesn't have a building program of their own. And there are quite a few of those around, especially in some of the more rural areas. But even in those places, they don't have any authority over class 2. So when questions come up on residential issues, I can provide code interpretations, I can provide my opinions, but there isn't anything that the state can do at the enforcement level for those. It doesn't change the fact that those regulations are in effect and they are required to be complied with. But if there's no one in a given jurisdiction to enforce them, it's difficult to tell what's going to happen. So that's probably one of the bigger ones. The other that I seem to run into from time to time is that the state really has no involvement, or at least our agency has no involvement in land use issues. Zoning is entirely local, and just about every other type of land use restriction until you start getting into issues that affect DNR or IDEM. There are no IDHS land use regulations. And so people come to me occasionally with complaints about zoning issues, and there is literally nothing I can do for them. So that's kind of one of the frustrating parts of the job, is dealing with those kind of misconceptions and the fact that very often I'm just unable to help.
Makes sense. And again, it kind of goes back to understanding what different departments or offices, what they do, what issues do they handle. Chad, how about your office? Is there something that the public doesn't quite understand about the services your office provides?
Yeah, just to stay on the zoning track, in Tippecanoe County, we have the Area Plan Commission, and the Area Plan Commission houses planning and zoning for the city of Lafayette, city of West Lafayette, Battleground, all the other little small towns. So, when they call us, we're not necessarily the planning department in West Lafayette, but we also work hand in hand with the Tippecanoe County Area Plan Commission on that. So I think that's kind of a key thing that could be totally different than if you went to another municipality or county that's neighboring us.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's kind of baked into your titles, right? It's building commissioner, so you guys are handling the structures and not necessarily the use of the property that the structure sits on. An important distinction. So I guess staying on that track, is there, and I'm going to try to phrase this politely, you both deal with contractors, right? Into varying degrees on class 1, class 2 structures. So let's not necessarily call it misconceptions, but are there areas that you wish, contractors or builders had a better knowledge in when they come to your offices, things that would make the I guess exchange of information a little easier, kind of that transaction a little better? I mean, Craig referred to the contractors and the owners as customers. So, it's always nice when that goes as smoothly as possible. So what can builders or contractors do to be better prepared when they come to your offices? Chad, I'll start with you.
I was going to say, I can start out with that, because when a contractor comes to my office, it's no matter what municipality or county you're in, it's the same working with Craig's office. You have to go through construction design release for that class 1 structure. So that's set no matter where you're at. But you could have a contractor that's used to working in Tippecanoe County or Benton County close, and our planning and our permit process is completely different. Anywhere from variance process to submitting for a building permit. Even the required inspections are different. In Westfield, you get a drywall framing inspection. I haven't done one of those in a handful of years. So I think the key is, and we've really tried, and COVID hasn't helped, but when I say we, I mean the building commissioners in Tippecanoe County and the city of Lafayette, we try to get together quarterly or so to talk about issues to where these contractors aren't trying to figure out 3 or 4 different ways of interpreting the code. It's all the same. So we do talk quite a bit. So I think that's one of the key things is on our end is how do we make everything kind of uniform no matter which municipality you're working in.
That makes sense. Craig, how about your office? What can builders and contractors do to be, I guess, better prepared when they apply for a permit for a class 1 structure, or not a permit, but approval? Do you have any recommendations?
Probably not much different from what I might suggest to anybody that comes to us for a construction design release. We actually don't deal with contractors much. When someone applies for a CDR, it's typically the design professional, if there is one involved on the project, or the owner of the structure. Once in a while, we'll get a contractor apply, but it doesn't happen frequently. More often than not, when I deal with contractors, it's because there's a problem that's escalated to my desk.
Sure.
And I won't name any names. That would be impolitic, I guess, but I will say that what seems to come up before me most often are questions regarding residential roofing, particularly storm repairs and things of that sort. There are a number of roofers out there, and I absolutely do not intend to paint the entire industry with a broad brush. I know there are many that are terrific contractors and very conscientious in their work, but there are some, frankly, that will try to skirt the code, particularly on insurance-related repairs, and I get a lot of complaints from homeowners about things like that. And again, because we have no enforcement authority over class 2 structures, there's very little I can do for them. If I could change anything about the construction industry in Indiana, I would eliminate those bad players somehow. But I don't have the authority to do that. So I
understand. I mean, it's kind of And any industry has good operators and bad operators. In construction, depending on the state, it drags the industry backwards when those bad operators show up. It makes everyone's job harder. Obviously, makes it more difficult for that particular owner. So I agree with you, Chad. Do you have, if you could, wave the magic wand? Is there anything that you'd like to see changed or improved in our industry?
I think we call them punch lists, and we don't like to be any contractor's punch list person. You have some job superintendents that are just on it and walk their jobs before we come out, and you have some that are sitting in the job trailer waiting on us to kind of give them that list. So, we don't want them to guess what we're looking for, but we also want them to be proactive in that. So, they're not all like that, but you can definitely tell, the crews that are just waiting on us to kind of give them that click that easy button and let us give them the list to do it.
Yeah, that we run into that sort of thing at the state as well, not from contractors, but from folks that submit plans for construction design releases. A lot of the submittals we see, not a majority by any means, but a sizable number, are from people that either don't understand the regulations or are looking for us to tell them what they need to do. And we cannot take on the role of being a code consultant or a designer for anybody. We're not allowed to. It would be viewed as a conflict of interest. So when they come to us, we expect them to have worked out all of their code problems beforehand. It's unrealistic to think that they're going to catch all of them. And frankly, neither do we. We cannot certify that any project we release is 100% code compliant. We just don't have the time and staff to get into projects at that level of detail. But we do serve a secondary purpose as kind of a backstop for designers to catch things that they might have missed. And we're happy to do that. And I think they appreciate the fact that we're here in that role. But we do see some that want to rely too heavily on us.
Right. Right. Well, I think that's, when we talk about a partnership, I mean, that's the way I've always looked at the permitting process and inspections and code interpretation is it's, you've got a partner, right? And I'm going to have a miss on a project or on a set of plans that I'm turning in. And it's nice to have someone that's going to kind of give you that second set of eyes. Now, by the same token, I don't like a punch list from an inspector. If I get a punch list from an inspector, that means that I didn't do my job, right? I did not have the property ready for inspection. If I've missed something, I'd like to see that caught, but we should be doing our job well enough that it's just a sign off. Okay, you've passed this next step in the process and now you can move forward. So I think when we talk partnership, that's the way everybody needs to look at these situations. Both of you have used the word, so this will be my final question. Both of you have used the word interpretation of code. I think a lot of people think code is very cut and dried, put tab A into slot B and that's it. That's the only way you can do it. Can either of you comment on when you talk about interpretation of code?
Well, and there are many regulations in the codes that are arcane and even poorly worded to the point where their intent is not entirely clear. So we get a lot of requests on things like that. We also get a lot of requests for subjects that I think are relatively clear cut. For example, in the residential code, in both the plumbing and electrical chapters, there's a scoping section right at the opening of those chapters that allows the owner to utilize either the plumbing or electrical sections of the residential code or the Indiana plumbing code and Indiana electrical code. It's their choice. They have to do all one or all the other. They can't cherry pick requirements from both of them. but they're allowed that choice. And when this 2020 code went into effect in December of 19, we got a lot of questions from code officials around the state that said, whoa, what is this? What does this mean? It just looks like you're giving people a choice. And it meant exactly what it said. We are giving people that choice. But the more interesting thing I think about that requirement is that it's an identical carryover from the 2005 code. So that regulation had been in place for 16 years.
Sure.
And they, I don't know if they just didn't realize it before or if they'd forgotten about it or what. But yeah, there are a lot of regulations that can be difficult to parse, and they're compounded by the fact that construction conditions and design conditions on projects on a given site can be unique in their own way and can require application of the code regulations in a particular way, or even just a determination whether a given regulation even applies to that situation. So there are all kinds of ways that people can need an interpretation of what you might think is just plain black and white text.
Makes sense. Chad, how about you?
Yeah, my level of interpretation isn't 100% of my job like Craig's, fortunately. So, but whether you're talking planning and zoning, we have an area plan ordinance committee, and it's good to sit and debate and interpret different things of the ordinance to adjust it over time. So there's avenues, just like that ordinance committee, to look at specific codes and laws and change them over time. So Craig's job in administering the state codes and changing those, is on a whole nother level than locally. Building code locally too, like we also have, like I said, we have a good working relationship with the West Lafayette Fire. So we're always kind of debating back and forth on the class 1 structure items. And it's good to kind of really throw those ideas and topics off of other people locally. So that we are all looking at it through the same lens, if you will. But that's kind of it in a nutshell in ours.
Could I just add one more thought about interpretations, particularly as it applies to Chad and his colleagues? I don't want to make it sound like I'm the only one who interprets the code. Everybody that enforces the code has to have their own understanding of it. In fact, the interpretation statute does not provide for an interpretation requested by a local official. If they're unclear about what a given code requirement says, the statute has no provisions for them to submit an interpretation request. They're expected to know this stuff, and the vast majority of the code officials around the state that I've met do a sterling job at all of that. There will obviously be cases where their understanding of a given regulation isn't what the commission has intended, or what I believe the commission was intending. And in those cases, if the owner or other interested party asks for an interpretation, I'll provide it, and the code official needs to take that into account. But every single regulation in the code, these guys have to know, and they have to have their own opinion about how it works. And that's a big task, and they do it well.
And I think that goes back to understanding the jurisdiction you're working in, because there's a different level of quality is not the right word, but working in a lot of different jurisdictions. I know when I'm at Chad's office in West Lafayette, I can get my questions answered. We can have good discussions. And in some jurisdictions, maybe a more rural jurisdiction, there's a lot more engagement that has to happen, especially if you've been in the industry a while. You start to learn the codes, you start to know them pretty well, and they may have a greater turnover in their office to where you get a younger building commissioner or a younger inspector who doesn't quite have that long-term exposure to the code book, and there's more discussions that have to take place just to make sure that everybody's on track for your inspections or any issues that might come up related to code. So again, do your homework and make everybody's life a little bit easier. So
yeah, I try to tell all of our customers it's in their interest to make our jobs as easy as possible.
I think that's it in a nutshell. And that means, as builders, as contractors, as the public, all this documentation is available. I mean, you can go to the websites, you can pull down the documentation, you can read through it, you can understand what the packets have to look like. You can access code online now, and do a lot of your own reading and investigation, and then go in with some, really good, intelligent questions. And it does make the conversation easier, when you can kind of speak the same language, right? It just makes the process go smoother. So, well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you giving up some of your valuable time, and sharing with us so we can better educate both students and the public about what happens in our industry, and specifically what happens on code enforcement and permits and inspections. So thanks for being with me today.
Very happy to be here. It was a pleasure.
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thanks, and have a great day.